Governor Inslee, I want to bring you in. You recently signed a public option into law, which allows Washington state residents to purchase a state-backed plan if they want to, but this may only save families in Washington state as little as 5% off premiums. Is 5% really the kind of relief that the American people need?
No, we need universal coverage, and I'm proud of our state that has done less squabbling and actually getting things done. And I am proud that we are the first state to offer a publicly sanctioned offer of health care to our citizens. I'm also proud that we didn't stop there. We're also the first state that has taken care of our elders, our seniors. We have a looming retirement wave coming up. I'm proud that our state has made them eligible to retire in dignity. I'm also proud of this, and I think we need to talk more about this as Democrats. It is time to give people adequate mental health care in this country. And we've had some success in integrating mental health with physical health. There's no reason we should distinguish between your physiological and your mental health. And the last thing we're doing, I think it's very instructive for the nation. We know we're being eaten alive by pharmaceutical costs. We have had one of, if not the most innovative way to drive down pharmaceuticals for life-saving medications in the United States. That's a record of Washington State. I'd like to take to Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor Inslee. Mr. Yang, I want to bring you in. You support a Medicare for all system. How do you respond to Governor Inslee?
Well, I just want to share a story. When I told my wife I was running for president, you know the first question she asked me? What are we going to do about our health care? That's a true story, and it's not just us. Democrats are talking about health care in the wrong way. As someone who's run a business, I can tell you flat out our current health care system makes it harder to hire. It makes it harder to treat people well and give them benefits and treat them as full-time employees. It makes it harder to switch jobs, as Senator Harris just said, and it's certainly a lot harder to start a business. If we say, look, we're going to get health care off the backs of businesses and families, then watch American entrepreneurship recover and bloom. That's the argument we should be making to the American people.
Thank you, Mr. Yang. Mayor de Blasio?
Yeah. I don't understand why Democrats on this stage are fear-mongering about universal health care. It makes no sense. Ask the American people. They are sick of what the pharmaceutical companies are doing to them. Ask them what they feel about the health insurance companies. They feel it's holding back their families because they can't get the coverage they need. They get a lot of no's. They don't get a lot of help from health insurance companies. Why are we not going to be the party that does something bold, that says we don't need to be dependent on private insurance? We can have a system that actually covers everyone. You know what? Donald Trump won this state of Michigan by saying he was going to disrupt the status quo. How about we be the party that's going to disrupt the status quo for working people?
Mr. Mayor, just a 15-second point of clarification. Who are you talking about? Who's fear-mongering?
Certainly, with all due respect to Senator Bennett, what he's saying is absolutely inaccurate about taxes. Americans right now are paying so much money for their health care. Ask people about the reality of premiums, deductibles, co-pays, out-of-pocket expenses. That's worse than any tax.
Thank you.
And people are paying that right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Senator Bennett?
This has nothing to do with Republican talking points or the pharmaceutical industry. This has to do with having faith in the American people that they can make the right decisions for their families and they can choose a public option. Bernie Sanders, who said last night he wrote the damn bill, and he did, just like I wrote the damn public option bill, is the guy who says it'll cost $32 trillion and that we're going to have to raise those taxes to pay for it. He says that. Republicans don't say it. Don't try to distract from the truth.
Thank you, Senator Bennett.
You can't hide from the truth.
I want to let Mayor de Blasio, and then I'm going to come to you, Vice President Biden.
Senator, if we as Democrats say we're done with private insurance that has only hurt the American people in so many ways, we're going to give them something that works for their families, full coverage that they can depend on. If we say that, then there's an election. The American people get to decide. The ultimate choice, Senator, is an election. And this should be the party that stands for universal health care and says we're not going to accept anything less. Right now in America, so many people don't have the health care they need. That is a fact. Tens of millions of people, including middle-class people.
Mayor.
Give them a chance to make that decision through an election.
Vice President Biden, your response, sir.
This is not a Republican talking point. The Republicans are trying to kill Obamacare. Obamacare took care of 20 million people right off the bat, 100 million people with pre-existing conditions. And in fact, what we add is a public option that in fact would allow anybody to buy in. No one has to keep their private insurance. They can buy into this plan, and they can buy into it with a $1,000 deductible and never have to pay more than 8.5% of their income when they do it. And if they don't have any money, they get in free. So this idea is a bunch of malarkey, what we're talking about here. The fact of the matter is that there will be a deductible. It will be a deductible in their paycheck. Bernie acknowledges it. $30 trillion has to ultimately be paid. And I don't know what math you do in New York. I don't know what math you do in California, but I tell you, that's a lot of money. And there will be a deductible. The deductible will be out of your paycheck because that's what will be required.
Senator Harris, I want to bring you in here. Your response?
Yeah, let's talk about math. Let's talk about math. Let's talk about the fact that the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies last year alone profited $72 billion. And that is on the backs of American families. And under your plan, status quo, you do nothing to hold the insurance companies to task for what they have been doing to American families. In America today, a diabetes patient, 1 in 4 cannot afford their insulin. In America today,
Thank you, Senator.
For those people who are overdosed from an opioid, there is a syringe that costs $4,000 that will save their life. It is immoral, it is untenable, and it must change with Medicare for all.
Vice President Biden, your response?
Real quick. I have the only plan that limits the ability of insurance companies to charge unreasonable prices, flat out, number one. Number two, we should put some of these insurance executives who totally oppose my plan in jail for the 9 billion opioids they sell out there. They are misrepresenting to the American people what need to be done. And lastly, here's the deal. The deal is, let's figure out how this works. We immediately are able to cover everybody who wants to get off of their insurance plan they don't like, no matter what one it is, and buy into a Medicare option. And they can buy the Gold plan, and they're not going to have to pay. Anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you. Let's move now to immigration, please. Secretary Castro, you think it should no longer be a crime to cross the U.S. border illegally. President Obama's Homeland Security Secretary, Jay Johnson, whom you served with, says that is a public declaration that the border is, quote, effectively open to all. How is he wrong?
Thank you for that question. You know, if you elect me president, you're not electing me to follow. You're electing me to lead. And open borders is a right-wing talking point. And frankly, I'm disappointed that some folks, including some folks on this stage, have taken the bait. The only way that we're going to guarantee that we don't have family separations in this country again is to repeal Section 1325 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. That is the law that this president, this administration is using to incarcerate migrant parents and then physically separate them from their children. My immigration plan would also make sure that we put undocumented immigrants who haven't committed a serious crime on a pathway to citizenship, that we do a 21st century Marshall Plan with Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala so that we can get to the root of this challenge so people can find safety and opportunity at home instead of having to come to the United States. That's how we can be smarter, more effective, and more humane when it comes to immigration policy.
Thank you, Secretary Castro. Senator Bennett, what's your response?
I disagree that we should decriminalize our border. This is personal for me. My mom's an immigrant, and she was separated from her parents during the Holocaust in Poland. And for those reasons, I was part of the Gang of Eight that I wrote the immigration bill in 2013 with John McCain that passed the Senate with 68 votes, that gave a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people that are here, that would pass the most progressive DREAM Act that had ever been conceived, much less passed on the floor of the Senate, and had $46 billion of border security. Every single Democrat voted for that bill,
Senator,
and a lot of Republicans. That should be our position.
Thank you, Senator.
That is our position.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Harris, you have indicated that you don't think it should be a criminal offense punishable by jail to cross the U.S. border illegally. How do you respond to Senator Bennett?
Well, again, with all due respect, after the last debate, for example, I went to a place in Florida called Homestead. And there is a private detention facility being paid for by your taxpayer dollars. A private detention facility that currently houses 2,700 children. And by the way, there were members of us, Julian was there, members of Congress. They would not let us enter the place, members of the United States Congress. So I walked down the road, I climbed a ladder, and I looked over the fence. And I'm going to tell you what I saw. I saw children lined up single file based on gender, being walked into barracks. The policies of this administration have been facilitated by laws on the book that allow them to be incarcerated as though they've committed crimes. These children have not committed crimes and should be not treated like criminals.
Senator Bennet, what's your response?
I think this is one, in the end, that we agree with. There's not a single person on this stage who, if we were president, would ever separate a child from their parents at the border. And that is what this administration has done in the American people's name. They have turned our border into a symbol of nativist hostility. The symbol of this country before Donald Trump was president was the Statue of Liberty. That should be the symbol of the United States of America, not Donald Trump's terrible
Thank you, Senator
border.
Bennet. Senator Gillibrand, I want to bring you in. What's your response?
So I think when you talk about whether this should be a crime, you have to remember who we're talking about. When I was at the Texas border, I visited with women who had fled violence. A woman from El Salvador owned a small business. Gangs came to her and said, if you don't give us all your money, we're going to kill your family. That's why she fled. Another woman was raped. That's why she fled. So this is who we're talking about, and they're not criminals. So I believe that we should have a civil violation. No president before President Trump enforced the law in the way he has enforced it, because he's using it as the crutch to lock up women and children, to separate mothers and babies, to put them behind bars. So I don't think we should have a law on the books that can be so misused. It should be a civil violation, and we should make sure that we treat people humanely.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Biden. In the first 2 years of the Obama administration, nearly 800,000 immigrants were deported, far more than during President Trump's first 2 years. Would the higher deportation rates resume if you're president?
Absolutely not, number one. Number two, everything landed on the president's desperate locus. I found that the secretary, we sat together in many meetings. I never heard him talk about any of this when he was the secretary.
Please be respectful. Please be respectful in the crowd. Please continue, Mr. Vice President.
The fact is, I don't know if you can hear, I can hear, but anyway.
We can hear fine, Mr. Vice President. Please continue if you will.
The fact is, what the senator from New York talked about is seeking asylum. That woman, the women she spoke to, are entitled to asylum. That is not crossing the border illegally. What we should do is flood the zone to make sure we have people to make those decisions quickly. With regard to the secretary's point, I already proposed and passed $750 million for Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras to be able to change the circumstance why people fled in the first place. In addition to that, we're in a circumstance where if, in fact, you say you can just cross the border, what do you say to all those people around the world who, in fact, want the same thing to come to the United States and make their case, but they have to wait in line? The fact of the matter is, you should be able to, if you cross the border illegally, you should be able to be sent back. It's a crime. It's a crime, and it's not one that, in fact...
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Secretary Castro, please, your response.
First of all, Mr. Vice President, it looks like one of us has learned the lessons of the past and one of us hasn't. Let me begin by telling you... Let me just start out by answering that question. My immigration plan would also fix the broken legal immigration system, because we do have a problem with that. Secondly, the only way that we're going to guarantee that these kinds of family separations don't happen in the future is that we need to repeal this law. There's still going to be consequences if somebody crosses the border. It's a civil action. Also, we have 654 miles of fencing. We have thousands of personnel at the border. We have planes, we have
Secretary,
boats, we have helicopters, we have security
Secretary
cameras.
Castro,
What we
thank you.
need are politicians
Your time
that
is
actually
up.
have some guts on this issue.
Thank you, Secretary. Mr. Vice President, please, your response.
I have guts enough to say his plan doesn't make sense. Here's the deal. The fact of the matter is that, in fact, when people cross the border illegally, it is illegal to do it unless they're seeking asylum. People should have to get in line. That's the problem. And the only reason this particular part of the law is being abused is because of Donald Trump. We should defeat Donald Trump and end this practice.
Thank you. Congresswoman Gabbard, what's your response?
Our hearts break when we see those children at these detention facilities who've been separated from their parents, when we see human beings crowded into cages in abhorrent, inhumane conditions. This is about leadership and understanding that we can and should have both secure borders as well as humane immigration policies. We will have to stop separating children from their parents, make it so that it's easier for people to seek asylum in this country, make sure that we are securing our borders and making it so that people are able to use our legal immigration system by reforming those laws.
Mr. Yang, your response.
I'm the son of immigrants myself. My father immigrated here as a graduate student and generated over 65 U.S. patents for GE and IBM. I think that's a pretty good deal for the United States. That's the immigration story we need to be telling. We can't always be focusing on some of the distressed stories. And if you go to a factory here in Michigan, you will not find wall-to-wall immigrants. You will find wall-to-wall robots and machines. Immigrants are being scapegoated for issues they have nothing to do with in our economy.
Thank you, Mr. Yang. Senator Booker, you have a plan that would, quote, virtually eliminate immigration detention. Does that mean that the roughly 55,000 migrants currently in detention would be released into the United States?
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to say, again, tonight, we are playing into Republican hands who have a very different view, and they're trying to divide us against each other. I'm listening to the language of my colleagues. No, Mr. Vice President, we are not going to just let people cross the border. An unlawful crossing is an unlawful crossing if you do it in the civil courts or if you do it through the criminal courts. But the criminal courts is what is giving Donald Trump the ability to truly violate the human rights of people coming to our country who no one surrenders their human rights. And so doing it through the civil courts means that you won't need these awful detention facilities that I've been to, seeing children sleeping on pavement, people being put in cages, nursing mothers, small children. This is not necessary. We have seen, using the civil system, piloted programs that have 100% compliance with the civil courts, where people are evaluated. If they have no justifiable reason to be here, they are returned. If they are, like the people I met in Juarez, who were survivors of sexual assault, who we wouldn't even let come and present for asylum. We are butchering our values and making ourselves
Senator Booker,
less
thank
safe.
you very much. Mr. Vice President, your response.
I agree with the senator. The asylum process is a real process, and this president is ruining it. It has nothing to do with that section of the law. That's what he's doing, number one. Number two, we should, in fact, and we have proposed and we tried to get past in our administration, and I propose, significantly increasing the number of legal immigrants who are able to come. This country can tolerate a heck of a lot more people. And the reason we're the country we are is we've been able to cherry pick from the best of every culture. Immigrants built this country. That's why we're so special. It took courage. It took resilience. It took absolute confidence for them to come. And we should be encouraging people. And by the way, anybody who crosses a stage with a PhD should get a green card for 7 years. We should keep them here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Governor Inslee, what's your response?
I think we're missing two central statements we need to make. Number one, we can no longer allow a white nationalist to be in the White House, number one. And number two, we have to make America what it's always been, a place of refuge. We got to boost the number of people we accept. I'm proud of being the first governor saying, send us your Syrian refugees. I'm proud to have been the first governor to stand up against Donald Trump's Muslim ban. I'm proud to have sued him 21 times and beat him 21 times in a row. I'm ready for November 2020.
Go ahead, Mayor de Blasio, please, your response.
2 points. One, it's all kind of a charade because there's 11 million people here. And everyone, in theory, has broken the law, but they're part of our communities now. They're part of our economy. They're our neighbors. Why are we even discussing on one level whether it's a civil penalty or a criminal penalty when it's an American reality? And what we need is comprehensive immigration reform once and for all to fix it. Second, Vice President Biden, I didn't hear your response when the issue came up of all those deportations. You were Vice President of the United States. I didn't hear whether you tried to stop them or not using your power, your influence in the White House. Did you think it was a good idea, or do you think it was something that needed to be stopped?
The president came along, and he's the guy that came up with the idea, first time ever, of dealing with the Dreamers. He put that in the law. He had talked about a comprehensive plan, which he laid before the Congress, saying that we should find a pathway to citizenship for people. He said we should up the number of people that we're able to bring into this country. Lastly, he also pointed out that we should go to the source of the problem and fix it where people were leaving in the first place. So he did. To compare him to Donald Trump, I think, is absolutely bizarre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Congresswoman Gabbard, you are a co-sponsor of the College for All Act, which would make public colleges and universities free for all Americans. One of the authors of that plan, Senator Sanders, believes college should be tuition-free for undocumented immigrants as well. Do you?
I don't. I think it's important for us to fix our legal immigration system and look at the millions of undocumented immigrants in this country who have been suffering as they've been living in the shadows. And instead of putting a Band-Aid on this problem, fix our legal immigration system to provide them with that pathway to legal residency or citizenship so that they're no longer treated as second-class citizens in this country. We've got to look at the challenge that people all across this country are facing under crushing student debt. This is something that is impacting my generation in a huge way, and I believe that it is our generation that has the bold, creative solutions to be able to solve it. This is about promise for our future, and we've got to make those kinds of investments.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Mayor de Blasio, what's your response?
Yeah, I agree with the Congress member, but I don't hear an answer from the Vice President. I'm confused. I asked the Vice President point blank, did he use his power to stop those deportations? He went right around the question. Mr. Vice President, you want to be President of the United States, you need to be able to answer the tough questions. I guarantee you, if you're debating Donald Trump, he's not going to let you off the hook. So did you say those deportations were a good idea? Or did you go to the president and say, this is a mistake, we shouldn't do it? Which one?
I was vice president. I am not the president. I keep my recommendations to him in private. Unlike you, I expect you would go ahead and say whatever was said privately with him. That's not what I do. What I do say to you is he moved to fundamentally change the system. That's what he did. That's what he did. But much more has to be done. Much more has to be done.
I still don't hear an answer.
Senator Booker, please respond.
Well, a couple things. First of all, Mr. Vice President, you can't have it both ways. You invoke President Obama more than anybody in this campaign. You can't do it when it's convenient and then dodge it when it's not. And the second thing, and this really irks me because I heard the Vice President say that, if you've got a PhD, you can come right into this country. Well, that's playing into what the Republicans want, to pit some immigrants against other immigrants. Some are from shithole countries and some are from worthy countries. We need to reform this whole immigration system and begin to be the country that says everyone has worth and dignity, and this should be a country that honors for everyone. Don't let the Republicans divide this party against itself.
Senator, thank you. Mr. Vice President,
your response. The fact is, that's what I said about this country. We are a country of immigrants. All of us. All of us. Some here came against their will. Others came because they, in fact, thought they could fundamentally change their lives. And they did. The statute of limitations, send us your. That's what we're talking about. That's what made us great. And the fact of the matter is, I think the President of the United States, Barack Obama, went out of his way to try to change the system, and he got pushed back significantly.
Senator Gillibrand, what's your response?
Again, President Trump, under his administration, 7 children died in his custody. Under his administration, families have been torn apart. This party is talking about real ideas for the future. We're talking about what we will do to change America. But we must not forget about our values. We used to believe in this country you should treat others the way you want to be treated. We used to believe in this country we should care about the least among us. Let's remind the American people who we are, why we are Democrats, and why we're running for president.
Senator Gillibrand, thank you very much.
Mr. Vice President, Senator Booker called your new criminal justice reform plan, quote, an inadequate solution to what is a raging crisis in our country, unquote. Why is Senator Booker wrong?
Well, I think he is wrong. I think we should work together. He has a similar plan. I think that we should change the way we look at prisons. Right now, we're in a situation where when someone is convicted of a drug crime, they end up going to jail and to prison. They should be going to rehabilitation. They shouldn't be going to prison. When in prison, they should be learning to read and write and not just sit in there and learn how to be better criminals. That when they get out of prison, they should be in a situation where they have access to everything they would have had before, including Pell Grants for education, including making sure that they're able to have housing, public housing, including they have all the opportunities that were available to them because we want them to become better citizens. That's the essence of what my plan in detail lays out. I'm happy to discuss it more in detail if the senator want to. And so I looked at it anyway. That's what I think my plan, I know what my plan does, and I think it's not dissimilar to what the senator said. We should be working together on getting things done.
Senator Booker, your response?
Well, my response is that this is a crisis in our country because we have treated issues of race and poverty, mental health and addiction with locking people up and not lifting them up. And Mr. Vice President has said that since the 1970s, every major crime bill, major and minor, has had his name on it. And sir, those are your words, not mine. And this is one of those instances where the House was set on fire and you claimed responsibility for those laws. And you can't just now come out with a plan to put out that fire. We have got to have far more bold action on criminal justice reform, like having true marijuana justice, which means that we legalize it on a federal level and reinvest the profits in communities that have been disproportionately targeted by marijuana enforcement.
Vice President Biden, I want to give you a chance to respond.
The fact is that the bills that the future president here, that the senator is talking about are bills that were passed years ago, and they were passed overwhelmingly. Since 2007, I, for example, tried to get the crack powder cocaine disparity totally eliminated. In 2007, you became mayor. You had a police department you went out and you hired Rudy Giuliani's guy. You engaged in stop and frisk. You had 75% of those stops reviewed as illegal. You found yourself in a situation where 3 times as many African-American kids were caught in that chain and caught up. The Justice Department came after you for saying you were engaging in behavior that was inappropriate. And then, in fact, nothing happened the entire time you were mayor.
Thank you, Senator Booker. You want to respond?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful that he endorsed my presidency already. But I'll tell you this. It's no secret that I inherited a police department with massive problems and decades-long challenges. But the head of the ACLU has already said, the head of the New Jersey ACLU, that I put forth national standard-setting accountability. Mr. Vice President, I didn't interrupt you. Please show me that respect, sir. We have a system right now that's broken. And if you want to compare records, and frankly, I'm shocked that you do, I am happy to do that. Because all of the problems that he is talking about that he created, I actually led the bill that got passed into law that reverses the damage that your bills that you were, frankly, to correct you, Mr. Vice President, you were bragging, calling it the Biden crime bill up till 2015.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Biden.
Number one, the bill he talks about is a bill that in our administration we passed. We passed that bill that you added on to. That's the bill, in fact, you passed. And the fact of the matter is, secondly, there was nothing done for the entire 8 years he was mayor. There was nothing done to deal with the police department that was corrupt. Why did you announce in the first day a zero-tolerance policy of stop and frisk and hire Rudy Giuliani's guy in 2007 when I was trying to get rid of the crack cocaine?
Mr. Vice President, there's a saying in my community, you're dipping into the Kool-Aid and you don't even know the flavor. You need to come to the city of Newark and see the reforms that we put in place. The New Jersey head of the ACLU has said that I embraced reforms, not just in action, but in deed. Sir, you are trying to shift the view from what you created. There are people right now in prison for life for drug offenses because you stood up and used that tough on crime, phony rhetoric that got a lot of people elected, but destroyed communities like mine. This isn't about the past, sir. This is about the present right now. I believe in
Thank you,
redemption.
Senator.
I'm happy you evolved.
I want to bring in
but
Secretary-
you offered no redemption to the people in prison right now.
I want to
for
bring in
life.
Secretary Castro. Your response, sir?
You know, I agree with Senator Booker that a lot of what Vice President helped author in '94 was a mistake. And he has flip-flopped on these things, and that's clear. But let me say, when we talk about criminal justice reform, there are a lot of things that we can talk about: sentencing reform, cash bail reform, investing in public defenders, diversion programs. I'm proud that I'm the only candidate that has put forward a police reform plan, because we have a police system that is broken, and we need to fix it. And whether it's the case of someone like Tamir Rice or Michael Brown or Eric Garner, where the Trump Justice Department just decided not to pursue charges, we need to ensure we have a national use of force standard and that we end qualified immunity for police officers so that we can hold them accountable for using excessive force.
Thank you, Secretary Castro.